The report, I think we owe it to them. There's a very difficult job to be done, and I wouldn't want to get in the way of that. But now I've seen it, I think the sanction really, it seems vindictive, it seems spiteful, and I think overreaching in terms of the sanctions it's got. I think Tom gave a very good comparison there with the other ones, and a lot of it seems to be for having the audacity to criticise them. Now, as members of Parliament, if we can't effectively scrutinise things and speak our mind, then what's the point of us being here?
I mean, a lot of this is, it would seem to be, I mean, away from the misleading Parliament, we'll come to that in a moment, but the rest of it seems to be, or a lot of it, about his reaction on Friday and that remarkable statement he put out. Now, they've got a point there, haven't they? That information released to him on a confidential basis, and he's breached that.
Well, I think he's agreed to go along with the committee. He's been very frank and very open with them in terms of the evidence that he's given and so on with that. And then he's received the draft report before all of us on the Friday, and he's clearly seen that he's not being given a free trial, so to speak, and it's been treated as a trial. It's not a trial, of course. If it were in a court of law, it would have been thrown out straight away. I think there are some very legitimate questions that he's asked. First, about how the committee's comprised. Of course, Chris Bryant had to recuse himself as being chair to start. Since then, Harriet Harman was appointed. There were questions asked about comments that she'd made previously, and then, of course, other revelations coming out as well about members of the committee. And again, I respect the work they do. I know it's very difficult, but really they have to accept criticism. And when people don't feel that something is right, they should be able to say that. Now, in terms of confidentiality, one point that I would certainly make on that is that a lot of people feel very well informed about this committee. Why? Because they're seeing it on Twitter. Now, every time the Times or whoever it is tweet about something, they've got that information from somewhere, and that's certainly not coming from Boris Johnson.
In terms of the main crux of the matter, though, deliberately misleading the House, do you challenge that in any way, shape or form?
Well, absolutely, and they must be mind readers, because, of course, Boris Johnson's been very clear. He said that the information that was provided to him, he was speaking in good faith to the House, and when more information came through afterwards, as happens with ministers, as has happened with me when I've been other dispatch box, you correct the record. Boris Johnson apologised, correct the record when more information came to light. So what they're saying is really that Boris has deliberately misled the House, and they think they can understand what he thinks. Now, if you could bottle that, I mean, you'd make a fortune. I mean, if I could understand what my wife's thinking all the time, then my home life would be a lot easier. So how they can say that without any actual evidence and do that as a conclusion, and then this ridiculous 90-day suspension and taking his pass away, it just seems spiteful. It's like the modern-day equivalent of putting people in the stocks and taking them out. So I'm going to vote against this on Monday. I'm going to be speaking out on it, and I'd encourage my colleagues to do the same.
Yeah, but they haven't done it without any evidence, have they? I mean, one of the key witnesses was Martin Reynolds, Boris Johnson's former principal private secretary, who questioned, apparently, how realistic it was for Boris Johnson to say he was told that rules in Downing Street had always been followed. Martin Reynolds saying that really wasn't a correct thing to say.
Well, there's so many grey areas with everything all the time with guidance, and of course a lot of the time you would say to people that this is what you should do, you need to try your best to work towards it, and of course these were not definitive laws in many cases, and also we have to remember we didn't have one long lockdown that went all the way through. The rules were changing as a constant. Of course, we were talking about a workplace environment as well. If we go into say that having an orange juice at your desk is having a party, then what about Durham? What about the other things that have come out in the last day or two? So I think there's a bit of nitpicking here as well, and applying things to Boris Johnson that aren't really being applied to other people.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, I mean, I imagine there's very little you would agree with Angela Rayner on, but didn't she have a point this morning when she said, look, Boris Johnson should have had a little bit of humility here?
Well, he has. He's been to the Commons. He's apologised. He's apologised on behalf of other people. So for things that he hasn't done, but as the man at the top, really, as Prime Minister, he took responsibility for that, and I think that was the right thing to do there. But I'm sure Angela Rayner, if ever she were hauled in front of a committee, or if any of her colleagues were going through a similar situation, I'm sure she'd hope they were treated fairly and they were treated based on the facts rather than who they are. Now, Boris Johnson, if it's not Partygate, it's about wallpaper or people disliking him for Brexit, of course, and there are people in the establishment who are desperate to bring down Boris Johnson, and of course they saw this as their opportunity to do that.